We begin to Gemara today on Yud Ches Amud Aleph. I think it's about 8 lines from the top, the beginning of the line where it says Uma Ro. We were speaking here about the order of the brachas in Shemay Nesra, and we got all the way until the bracha of Maidim. It went through all the brachas. What do we do at the end of the bracha of Maidim? After the bracha of Maidim, we say Birchas Kayanim, or the Kayanim actually bench them. So the Gemara wants to know, why is that the place of Birchas Kayanim? Uma Ro Loimar Birchas Kayanim Acha Hidah. Why does Birchas Kayanim come after the bracha of Heidah? The answer is the Chsiv, because on the Yom HaShmini there by the Mishkan, what does it say? Vayisa Arnes Yadav Ala'am. Aaron HaKohen picks up his hands to the people, Vayevarchem, and he benched them. Vayered Ma'asais Achatas Va'oilo Va'ashlamim. And he came down from bringing the Chatas, Oila, and the Shlomim. So what do you see over here? That the Birchas Kayanim comes at the time after you speak about the Chatas and the Oila and the Shlomim. So same thing over here, we say Birchas Kayanim after the bracha of Ritzei, which is the speaking about the Karbanis, and then the bracha of Heidah of Maidim. But the Gemara asks, according to this pasuk, Eime Kaidam Aveda. We should say Birchas Kayanim before the pasuk of the bracha of Aveda, before the bracha of Ritzei, because what does it say here? It says that Aaron HaKohen benched the Yidden, and then afterwards it talks about the Chatas, Oila, and Shlomim. So the Gemara says, Lo yisal kadaitach. No, you can't say that. The Chsiv, because it says it, Vayered mea soisa chatas v'goyme. And he came down from doing the chatas. Miksiv, lasais, does it say that he came down lasais, did it after? He benched the Yidden now, he went down to do it now? Mea sois Chsiv, it says mea sois, which means from what he already had done before. So all the Kabbanis were brought before he did the Birchas Kayanim. And then he did the Birchas Kayanim, and then he went down from the Mizbeach. But it's after the Aveda. But the Gemara asks, if so, v'leimre achara Aveda. If from this pasuk you see that Birchas Kayanim comes after the Kabbanis, so we should do Birchas Kayanim after the bracha of Ritzei, Amachzu Shchinasei L'Tzion, right then, before the bracha of Maidim. So again the Gemara says, Lo yisal kadaitach. No, that's also not the way it's done. The Chsiv, Zoiveach Toida, because we brought before the pasuk, when it spoke about the Aveda, Ritzei, and the Maidim going together, Zeiveach Taida, that Karbanis, the carbon Taida, goes together with the other Karbanis. So therefore we see that Heidah goes together with Aveda, with the Karbanis. Fragt the Gemara, my chazis the samchas ahai, smoich ahai. Why are you relying on the pasuk of Zeiveach Taida that shows that Aveda and Heidah have to go together? Maybe rely on the other pasuk that we brought that shows that Birchas Kayanim comes right after Aveda, before Heidah. So the Gemara says, no, mistavre, because it's logical to say that Aveda v'Heidah chadem milsihi. Aveda and Heidah go together, it's one thing. As Rashi says, Heidah is also part of Aveda. Part of our Aveda to the Eibishter is to be Meidis, to thank the Eibishter. So that goes together. So the Gemara continuing after Birchas Kayanim. Omar ro loimar sim shalom acha Birchas Kayanim. Why do we say the bracha of sim shalom after Birchas Kayanim? The Chsiv, it's because the pasuk says regarding Birchas Kayanim, v'sama shmi bnei Yisrael, that the Kayanim will put my name upon the Yidden, and then the Eibishter says va'ani avarchim, I will bench them. The Eibishter will bench them. Now, what's the bracha of the Eibishter? Bracha, da Kadosh Baruch Hu shalom. The Eibishter's bracha is shalom, peace. Shenemar Hashem yivarach esamay b'shalom. So after Birchas Kayanim comes the Eibishter's bracha, which is sim shalom. Okay, so that's the conclusion of all the brachas of Shemay Nesra. Now the Gemara clarifies something that it said all the way at the beginning of this Indian. I mentioned it. So since we said that it's the 120 Zakanim and the Nevi'im amongst them, which is the Anshe Knesset Agdela, they were masak in the order of the Shemay Nesra. So then why did we say that Shimon HaPakuli, so my history, so why did we say that Shimon HaPakuli, he's the one that organized these brachas in front of, who was it? Rabbi Gamliel, right? So why are we mentioning Shimon HaPakuli? So the Gemara answers, Shakchum Chazra v'Sidrum. They had the brachas from before, from the Anshe Knesset Agdela, then it was forgotten, and he came and organized it again. Now the Gemara continues, Mekan ve'eleich, after these 18 brachas, or now it's 19 brachas. You're not allowed to come and add other brachas to praise the Eibishter more. So that Rashi clarifies this. When it says Asa l'saper, it refers to adding another bracha because you want to praise the Eibishter more. If a person wants to say another praise outside of Shemay Nesra, that's not what the Gemara is talking about. But to add another bracha here, that's not allowed. What is the meaning of the pasuk where it says, Mi yigmalul gvuras Hashem? Who could say the greatness of the Eibishter? Shmiya kolti lase, the one that lets hear all of the Eibishter's praise. So what does this mean? L'min no lamal gvuras Hashem. For whom is it beautiful to say the greatness of the Eibishter? L'mishi yachal hashmiya kolti lase. Only for someone that has the ability to say all of Hashem's praise, and nobody has that ability. So therefore, nobody could come and make his own nusach of a bracha to add something more. Person that comes and says the praise of the Eibishter more than what he's supposed to, more than the nusach of what it was said, it uproots him from the worlds, because in that way he's diminishing the Eibishter's greatness. There's a pasuk that says, should it be related to him, ki adaber, that I speak, im amar ish, if a person will say this, ki yavula, he will be swallowed up. So the Gemara is darshaning this pasuk to say that a person that comes and says, that I will speak and I will say all of the greatness of the Eibishter, if that's what a person says, ki yavula. So what happens is you get swallowed up. Darish Rabbi Yehuda darshan, ish kfar gevruye, either he came from this village, or v'amrila ish kfar giber chayil, came from another village called giber chayil. What's the meaning of the pasuk where it says, L'cha, for you the Eibishter, dumiyah tehillah. So being quiet is praise. Sama the kula, the best the best potion, or the best medicine for everything is mishtaika, to be quiet. Because if a person will praise, so you don't know if you're praising properly or not. But if a person is quiet, so then that's the greatest praise. So you know that it's beyond words. Kiyasar Avdimi Amar, when Avdimi came, he said, Omri b'marave, in Eretz Yisrael they say, Mila b'sela, that for speaking you pay 1 sela, mashtuke betrein. But to be quiet, it's worth more, it's worth 2 slaim. So it's in relation to what we're speaking about over here, that if a person comes and he has praise to say, so then that's worth 1 sela. But quietness is a greater level of praise, because that refers to a person that realizes that the Eibush is beyond words. Yeah, also, right, very good. So the Gemara continues, now back to the Mishnah. It said in the Mishnah, Kara al peh lo yotze. You read the Megillah, not inside the words of the Megillah, you'll be yotze. So minalon, you're not yotze, that is. You're not yotze. Minalon, from where do we know this? Omar Rave, so Rave says, Asye zechira chschira. We learn out from Gzeira Shave in the word zechira. Ksivacha, here regarding the Megillah, it says, Vayameile niskarim, as we mentioned before, niskarim v'nasim refers to remembering it by reading the Megillah. Ksiv Hasam, and regarding the mitzvah of remembering Amalek, it says, Ksiv Zais, Zikarim Basefer, that write this as a remembrance in the Sefer. Samal Alam Basefer, just like by Amalek you have to read from the Sefer Torah, Avkam Basefer, so to here you have to read it from the Megillah. But now the Gemara asks regarding Amalek, Umimai, the high schire kriyi. By Amalek, how do you know that over there it Bechlal means that you have to read from the Sefer? Maybe Dilme Iyam Balma. Maybe it means that you just have to look into the Sefer and think about it without verbalizing it. So if we're learning out from Amalek over there, maybe it's a different thing. You don't know over there Bechlal that you have to read. So the Gemara says, Lo Yisal Kedaitach. You can't say that by Amalek. Why? Because what does it say? D'chsiv Zocher. That you should remember Amalek. So, Yachol believe, I would think that means only in the heart. When it says in the pasuk Lo Tishkach, that you should not forget. It already says that it should not be forgotten in the heart. Hamani Mekayim Zocher. So why does the Torah also say Zocher? But peh, to let you know that it's not just in the heart, but it should also be verbally. So the same thing over here. We can learn out Megillah from Amalek, that when you read Megillah verbally, it should be inside the Megillah like it is by Amalek. The Mishnah said, Kara Targum lo yotza. If you read it in Aramaic, you're not yotze. Or if you read it in any other language, you're not yotze. Someone wants to understand what exactly is the case here. In what language is the Megillah itself written? Hey Chidami, what are we speaking about? If he has a regular Megillah that's written Mikra, in other words, it's written in Lashon Kodesh, like every Megillah, V'kari lo Targum, and he's not reading it in the Lashon of the Megillah, he's reading it in Aramaic or in another language, so Hainu al Peh. It's the same thing like saying before, when a person reads it, not looking inside the Megillah. He's translating it into a different language, he's not reading it from the Megillah. So the Gemara answers, Targum, Targum. We're talking here about a person that has a Megillah written in the language of Aramaic or any other language, and he's reading it in that language. So he's reading it inside, and that's what the Megillah is saying, the Gemara is saying, the Mishnah is saying, that you're not Yetzer because it's a different language. Then it said in the Mishnah, Aval Kairin Oisel Aloyes es Balaz. Someone that understands a different language, you could read it for him in another language. So the question is, there's a contradiction there. You just said that if you read it in any language, you're not going to be yaitza. So the Gemara answers, Rav and Shmuel Damri Tarvayu, Rav and Shmuel both explained, Balaz Yavani. We're speaking specifically in Greek. The Lashon Yavani has a special chashivas to it. We once learned about this earlier in the Gemara. It spoke about the Lashon of Yavani being more chashiv. So dafka Lashon Yavani, if you read it for someone that understands that language, is going to be yaitza, but not any other language. So the Gemara is going to refute this, as we'll see. So the Gemara asks, Hey Chidami. First the Gemara clarifies the same point that it just said before regarding the actual Megillah itself. So Hey Chidami, what are we speaking about? Are you saying that the Megillah itself is written in Lashon Kodesh, V'kadi lo Yavanis, and he's reading it in Greek? So Hainu al Peh. That's the same thing as al Peh, so even in Yavanis, he shouldn't be yaitze. So the Gemara gives the answer it said before. Omer Rav Acha, Omer Rav Elazar, Sheksuva Belaz Yavanis. The Megillah itself is also written in Yavanis, and he's reading it inside the Megillah in Yavanis. Okay, the Gemara takes a short break here to bring another memra, another statement in the name of the same Amayra, and then it comes right back to this discussion. From where do we see that the Eibusher refers to Yaakov Avinu with the name Kel, which means also strength and greatness? Shanama, there's a pasuk that says, "Vayikra loy Kel Elokei Yisrael," that he called it Kel Elokei Yisrael. The simple pshat of that pasuk is it's referring to Yaakov, that Yaakov called the Mizbeach Kel Elokei Yisrael. So the Gemara now explains, no, it refers to the Eibishter calling Yaakov. If you would just say the simple pshat, that Yaakov referred to the Mizbeach as Kel, so Vayikra lo Yaakov in Boile. The pasuk should have said Vayikra lo Yaakov. Why doesn't it say Yaakov's name here? Ella, rather, so the Gemara Darshans, what this pasuk is saying is, Vayikra loy le Yaakov Kel. The Eibishter referred to Yaakov as Kel. That's the first part of the pasuk. And then when the pasuk continues and says Elokei Yisrael, what it's saying is, Mi kare Kel, who called Yaakov Kel? Elokei Yisrael, the Eibishter, the God of the Yidden, he called Yaakov Kel. That's the pshat of this pasuk. So the Gemara goes right back to what we discussed before. So what did we say? The pshat of our Mishnah is, any other language, if you read it even in the Megillah that's written in that language, you're not going to be yaitze. But in Yavanis, that Rav and Shmuel said, if the Megillah is written in Yavanis, and you read it in Yavanis, you will be yaitze. So the Gemara asks on this. It says in the Braisa, Meisvei Kara Giftis. You read it in the language of Giftis, or Ivris, which is not Lashon Kodesh, it's some language that's on the other side of the river. Ilmis, or in Ilmis, or in Modis, or in Yavanis. And it says here Yavanis amongst all other languages that it mentions here. Lo Yatza, you're not going to be Yaitze. So you see here clearly that for reading it Yavanis, you're not Yaitze. Not like Rav and Shmuel said that you are. So the Gemara answers, Holidamye Elolaha. What Rav and Shmuel said is like what it says in that Braisa afterwards. What does it say there? Giftis, li giftim. If you read it in the language of Giftis, for people of Giftim that understand that language. And the same thing, Ivris li Ivrim, Ilmis li Ilmim, Yavanis li Yavanim. If they understand that language, then Yatza. Then you are Yaitze. So you see over here that you're Yaitze if you're reading it for someone that understands that language. So now the Gemara says, if so, if the point is like it says in the second part of the Braisa, that as long as you're reading it to people that understand that language, you will be Yaitze. So if so, Ihachi Rav Shmuel Amai Maipil Alamasnisim Belaz Yavanis. Why are they saying that our Mishnah is speaking about that if you translate it in Yavanis, particular Dafke Yavanis, then you're going to be Yaitze, because Yavanis is a unique language. No, it says here in this Braisa, as long as you're reading in a different language, for somebody that understands that language, he's going to be Yaitze. Laikma b'chalaz. Why don't we say that this is talking about any language? So over here, that's the first part of the Braisa. But look again, what does it say in the second part of the Braisa? Second part of the Braisa where it says Giftis legiftim, Ivris leivrim, Ilmis leivrim, Yatza. You are Yaitze, right? So over here it's saying that as long, basically the Braisa is saying, if you read it in a different language and the people do not understand the language, so then they're not Yaitze. But if you read it in a different language and people understand that language, then they will be Yaitze. So why is Rav Shmuel pointing out specifically Yavanis? So the Gemara says, Ella masnisim kebraisa. So really, you're right, the pshat in our Mishnah is like what it said in the Braisa. And you see it in the Lashon of the Mishnah itself, as Rashi points out. What did it say in the Mishnah? The Lashon of the Mishnah was, Kairin Oisa Luloyazais Bilaz. For people that understand that language, you can read it in that language. But if you're reading it in another language and people don't get it, then you can't read it for them in that language. So the pshat in our Mishnah is like it said in the Braisa. V'chi itmer, the Rav Shmuel, and when Rav and Shmuel said what they said, Ba'al me'itmer. They're not saying it as a pshat in the Mishnah, they're saying b'chlal. They're saying b'chlal that there's the chshivus of the language of Yavanis, that besides the point of what it said in our Mishnah, the language of Yavanis has an additional chshivus that even if you don't understand it, you're still going to be yaitza. So Rav and Shmuel, Damri Tarvayu, Rav and Shmuel both said that Laz Yavani Lakel Kosher, that the language of Yavani, for anybody, you can read it in that language. But they weren't saying pshat in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah was talking about any language as long as you understand it. But the Gemara asks on this, how could you say that Yavanis is a language which is an exception? Look at what it says in this Braisa. V'ha ketani, the lashon of this Braisa is Yavanis le-Yavanim. That even the language of Yavanis, you're only going to be yaitze if you read it for the Yavanim, meaning someone that understands that language. So only le-Yavanim in, but le-kula al-malay, for anybody else, you're not going to be yaitze. So the Gemara says, you're right, Rav and Shmuel cannot say what they said according to this Braisa. But inu the Amri, the Amor, Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. What they says follows the opinion of Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, which we had earlier in the Masechta. That Nan, Rab Shimon ben Gamliel Leimer, Rab Shimon ben Gamliel says, Av Sfarim lo yitiru sheyichtavu elo Yavanis. So if you remember, we had there a Mishnah, the Tanna Kama there said that you could write the Tanakh, the Sfarim of Tanakh in any language. Rab Shimon ben Gamliel says, no, you could only write it in Yavanis. So it's according to Rab Shimon ben Gamliel that says that Yavanis is a chashav, a unique language. According to him, you could read the Megillah in Yavanis even for someone that does not understand Yavanis. If so, says the Gemara, if they're just saying Rab Shimon ben Gamliel's opinion, so v'leimer halach Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. Let them just say that the halach is like Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. And says the Gemara, I amri halacha Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, if they would just say that, hava mineh hanimili shar sfarim, so I would say maybe it's all of the sfarim of Tanakh, the halach is like Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. Ava Megillah, the chsivba, kiksavam, but maybe I would say that the Megillah, since it says in it, kiksavam emeloi, maybe I would say that Megillah is actually an exception, and you cannot read it in Yavanis, kamash malan. That's why Rav and Shmuel is saying that even the Megillah, in Yavanis, it can be read for anybody, even if you don't understand the language of Yavanis. Gemara continues, it said in the Mishnah, V'aloyes Hashem Ashuris Yotza, that the law is that here's the Megillah in Lashon Kodesh, and he doesn't understand Lashon Kodesh, but here he is Yaitze. He has no idea what he's saying. So what's the point? And for the Gemara, Mididahavi, Anoshim, Va'amei, it's also just like there could be women and Amei that don't understand Lashon Kodesh, and they hear the Megillah and they're Yaitze. So same thing also, a person that doesn't get the language is also Yaitze. So Ravina says, you're bringing from Noshim and Amei. What's about everybody else? Atu Anan, is it us that understand every single word of the Megillah? It says in the Megillah, Ha'achshtaronim b'nei haramachim. Miyadina, do we have any idea what those words mean? So there are words in the Megillah that we also don't know what they mean. Ella, mitzvahs kriye o presumi nisa. When we read the Megillah, there's a mitzvah to read it, whether you understand it or not. And then there's also the presumi nisa that it accomplishes, as Rashi explains, even if you don't understand what you're reading, but what happens when you read the Megillah? So people will eventually ask, so what does it say here? And you'll end up telling the story. So there is a presumi nisa in reading the Megillah, even if you're not actually understanding every word. So mitzvahs kriya presumi nisa. Even for someone that doesn't understand at all what he's reading, he's doing the mitzvah of reading it, and there's also presumi nisa. Zok the Gemara Kara Seirigin Yatza v'chulo. Said in the Mishnah, if you read the Megillah Seirigin, you yaitze. So now the Gemara says, Lehavi yadi Rabbanon my Seirigin. The Rabbanon did not know what the Seirigin mean. Shamuel Amsa the Rebbe, they heard a maid in the house of Rebbe, the Ka'amr Lul Rabbanon, she said to the Rabbanon, the Hava Aili, Paski Lebe Rebbe, the students that were coming to learn by Rebbe, and they were coming in one group at a time, with breaks between one another. And she said to them, Ad Masai Atam Nechnasim Seirigin, until when are you coming in Seirigin, meaning in intervals, not coming in together. So now they understood that what does Seirigin mean? Someone that reads the Megillah and he makes breaks between one part and the other part. That's the taich of Seirigin. Now the Gemara will go through similar other things that the Rabbanon did not know what it means, and they learned it from the maid of Rebbe. We had this Gemara is also in Rosh Hashanah. Rabbanon my chaluglugais. Rabbanon had no idea what chaluglugais is, and this is something which some kind of a herb that's mentioned in Mishnayos. They didn't know what this means. Shamuel Amsa the Beit Rebbe. So they heard the maid of Rebbe, the Amra la lahu gavra. She was saying to this person, the Havaka mevader parpachini, that he was spreading around parpachini, which is porcelain, I believe. Ad masiyat mefazer chalug. Until when are you spreading around your chalug? So from this they knew what chalug is. Lahaviyadi rabbanon my salsala v'tarayim mekah. They didn't know what the taich of the word salsala means. What is the translation? Shamuel Amsa de Rebbe. They heard the maid of Rebbe. The Avas Amr Lahu Gavra. She was saying to a person that was combing his hair. The Avamahapach b'mazye. He was combing his hair, and you turn the hair one direction and another direction. Amr Lei. She said to him, Ad Masai Ata Misalsal B'Sarecha. Until when are you going to be misalsal, which means combing and turning your hair one way to another? And the same thing also when a person praises the Eibishter, so he turns in one way, he says it's in one way, in another way. That's the concept of salsala. Okay, another thing they didn't know as well. Lahaviyadi Rabbanan my hashlech al Hashem Yehavcha. What does this word Yehavcha mean? Throw on the Eibishter your Yehav. So I was once traveling together with this Arab merchant. The Kadarina Tuna, I was carrying this load on me. Va'amali, this Arab merchant told me, Shkoil Yahavech v'shadi agamloi. Take your load and throw it on my camel. So he knew now that Yahav means a load. Take your load and throw it on the Eibishter. The last thing, the Rabbanan did not know what's the meaning of the pasuk where it says v'tetesia b'metate hashmed. Hashmed we know means to destroy, but what does v'tetesia b'metate mean? Shamuel amsa de Rebbe, they heard the maid by Rebbe. She said, she said to her friend, Shkuli tetesia v'tati beisa. Take the broom and broom out the house. So they knew that this means tetesia b'metate. The Eibishter is going to clean out and broom out. Tana Rabbanon, going back to the halacha of Seidegin. So we learned, Kara, Seidegin, Yatza. Person that reads the Megillah Seidegin in intervals is Yaitza. Seiru Sin, if you read it Seiru Sin, which means out of order, like we learned in the Mishnah L'mafreya, Lo Yatza. You're not going to be Yaitza. Rab Muna says, going back to Seidegin, it depends. Mishum Rab Yehuda, in the name of Rab Yehuda, Af Beseidegin, even when you read the Megillah, Seidegin, which means with breaks, Im Shah, if he waits long enough, Kedei Ligmar's Kula, that as long as it would take to finish the whole Megillah, then Chayzel Reish. Then you do have to go back to the beginning of the Megillah. You can't wait that long. Amar Rav Yosef, so Rav Yosef said about this, Halacha Rab Munah, Sh'amar Mishum Rab Yehuda. We paskin like Rab Munah, that what he said in the name of Rab Yehuda. Now, the Gemara is going to bring over here another pshat in this. Now, when it says here, until you have the time to finish all of the Megillah, what does this mean? So, Amalei Abai Rav Yosef, Kedei Ligmar Es Kula, when he says that if you made a break in order to finish all of the Megillah, what did he mean? Mehecha de Koi L'Sefer. That means as long as it would take to finish the Megillah from wherever you were up to until the end, Aydilma Mireisha L'Sefer. Or maybe this means how long it would take to finish the entire Megillah from beginning till the end. Amalei Mireisha L'Sefer. It means as long as it would take to finish the entire Megillah. Why not? Why? The imkain, because if you're going to say, it just means from where you are up to, Masata Devarecha L'Shiyurin. So that would mean that this shiur of how long of a break requires you to go back to the beginning. There's different shiurim for this. Depends where you're holding. Chachamim never give a shiur that will depend on each individual. Chachamim always give shiurim that are established for everyone the same. So you can't say that it's for everyone according to the place that he is up to. Amar Rab Abba, Amar Rab Yirmiyah, Bar Abba, Amar Rav. Halachik Rab Munah. That he paskin like Rab Munah. The Gemara here is going to bring a few different versions. Who said what? Whether the halacha is like Rab Munah or not. So now we have that Rab Yirmiyah, Bar Abba says in the name of Rav that the halacha is like Rab Munah. And Shmuel says, Ein halacha Rab Munah. That the halacha is not like Rab Munah. Now the Gemara says, Besura masnahachi. In Surah, which is a city in Bavel, they said the version like we just said it. The Pumbedise masnahachi, but in Pumbedise they said it a bit differently. That Amar Rav Kahana Amar Rav, it was Rav Kahana that said in the name of Rav that halacha is Rab Munah, and Shmuel Amar en halacha Rab Munah, and Shmuel said halacha is not like Rab Munah. Now another version, Rav Beve masni ipche. Rav Beve said that it's actually the opposite. Rav Amar, Rav is the one that said en halacha Rab Munah, that we don't follow Rab Munah, and Shmuel Amar, Shmuel is the one that said halacha Rab Munah, that we do follow Rab Munah. Rav Yosef, so Rav Yosef said, Nekaita Rav Beive biyadcha. This last version that says that Shmuel is the one that says that we do paskin like Rav Munah, you should take that version, that's the right version. Why? The Shmuel hu the chayish liyichida. Because we find Shmuel is the one that is concerned about one single opinion, even though usually we have the klal that a yachid and a rabbim, we follow the rabbim, but in a case where the yachid is machmer, we find that Shmuel says to follow one single opinion. Where do we see this? Regarding a halacha by a yavama. Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, Shemeres Yavam. A Shemeres Yavam is a woman that died without any children. And so then her brothers have to be miyabim her. Who's the one that has the mitzvah to be miyabim her? The oldest brother. Really, all brothers have the mitzvah, but the oldest brother is the one that's miyabim her. So you have here a Shemeres Yavam. Now, Shekidish Achiv Es Achaisa. One of the brothers went and married the sister of this Shemeres Yavam, of this woman. So now what's the halacha? Mishum Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Amru, so in the name of Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira they said, Oimrim loy, they say to this brother, Hamtein achiyasa achicha gadol ma'isa. You have to wait, this sister of this Yavama, if you want to get married, you have to wait until the older brother will go and be miyavim this Yavama. What's the reason for this? So Rashi explains, even though it's really the older brother that has the mitzvah to get married to this Yavama. So another brother could come and say, it's not, this Shemeres Yavam has nothing to do with me. I want to get married to her sister, and this is not my mitzvah. But it's not so. What Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says is that before the oldest brother will go and be miyavim her, she's really connected to all brothers. Because if the older brother is not going to be miyavim her, they all have a mitzvah to be miyavim her. So therefore, when you're going to marry her sister, it's the sister of a woman that is already connected to you. You can't marry two sisters. So therefore, you have to wait until the older brother is going to be miyavim her. And now, once the older brother did the mitzvah, so now she's not associated with you, now you can go and get married to the sister. That's what Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says. But this is only Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira's opinion, though. The Rabbanan disagree with this. The Rabbanan say, the brother could say, I have nothing to do with this Shemeres Yavam. Okay, so that's a machlokes there. And there we see, Alma Shmuel, Shmuel said, Halacha Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, that we paskin like Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. So just like there we see that Shmuel was concerned for a single opinion against the Rabbanan, so to here, Shmuel is the one that paskin like Rab Munah, which is a single opinion against the Rabbanan. Tana Rabbanan, we learned in the Braise, Hishmid ba Sefer Oisiyas Psukim. If when the Sefer wrote the Megillah, he skipped some letters, or he skipped even some Psukim, V'karan Akaire, and the one that read the Megillah, he read it, Kimiturgim and Amatargim, like the one that translates the Megillah, and he does not read from inside. So over here, those words, or those Psukim, he did not read from inside. Yatsa, you're going to be Yaitza. Even though not the full Megillah is written, so part of it you're reading outside. Meisvei, the question was asking this, it says in the Braisa, you have the letters in the Megillah that were like erased, they're not written clearly. What's the words? Fudged up. Oy mikurais. Or it's torn, the letters are torn. So the Braisa says, Imri Shuman Niker, if you see the mark of these letters clearly, so then Ksheira. So then what you're reading from the Megillah is kosher. Ve'im lav, psula. But if you don't see clearly the letters that you're reading from, so it's possible. You have to read from Megillah that you could see every word clearly. That's what it seems. So the Gemara says, Loikashi ha bikula. If all of the Megillah is fudged up or torn up, or when the Gemara says kula, doesn't mean kula, it means even most of the Megillah is this way, so then you're not going to be yaitza. Ha b'miktsasa. But if it's only a minority of the Megillah, if you have one pasuk or some words or so on, so then if you read from the Megillah and some of it is not there, you're going to be yaitza. Tana Rabbanan, we learned in Abraise, Hishmid ba kaira pasuk echad. What happens if you read the Megillah and you skipped a pasuk? So what do you do now? Lo yoyma, you shouldn't say ekras kula. Let me continue going, finish the whole Megillah, and v'achakach ekra oisei pasuk. I'll go back, in the end, I'll just read that pasuk that I missed. Can't do that. Why? That would be called kaira lemafreya. You're reading it out of order. Ela kaira ma'isa pasuk ve'elach. You have to go back to that pasuk that you skipped, and you have to read again from there going forward. Similar, nichnas lebeis hakneses. What happens? A person comes into shul and he came late. And he sees that the people already, they have read half of the Megillah. So lo yoymar, he shouldn't say ekra chetzia imatzibur. So let me hear half of the Megillah with the tzibur, and then v'achakach ekra chetzia. Then I'll go and I'll read the other half for myself. you're reading it out of order. You're hearing the second half first, and then you're going to read the other half afterwards. So that you can't do that. You have to go and read the Megillah, start from the beginning and read it in the order until the end. Said in the Mishnah, misnamnem yotza. If you're dozing off, then you yotza when you hear the Megillah. What does this mean? What's misnamnem? You have this many times in Shas. So the Gemara explains, hey chidami. What does misnamnem mean? Hey chidami misnamnem, that is. Amar Ravashi nim v'loy nim. He's asleep, but he's not asleep. Tir v'loy tir. He's awake and he's not awake. Which means the korele v'ani, that when you call him, he's able to answer, but he's not able to answer you something that he has to explain, something that you need to explain an idea, he can't explain it to you. But when you remind him something, he could remember it. So he's awake but not awake. So you can be Yaitse in the Megillah this way. It said in the Mishnah, if someone was writing the Megillah, Darsha, he was darshaning the Megillah, umagia, he was proofreading the Megillah, im kiven libe yatzah. So if he's reading it in this way and he had kavana for the mitzvah, he will be yaitze. So the Gemara wants to understand regarding the person that's writing the Megillah. What is this talking about? Hey chidami, what's the case here? The karmisader psuka. Is it that he's saying the psukim to himself? For example, he starts by the beginning of the Megillah and he says Vayihi b'meach hashverish, and then he goes and writes the three words Vayihi b'meach hashverish. If that's how he's doing it. So if so, the cost of law, and after he says it, he writes it, but kikivan liboy might have it. Even if he has kavana that he should be yaitze the mitzvah, how does that help? Al pehu. He's reading the Megillah outside. He's not reading it in the words of the Megillah. He's writing it after he says it. So the Gemara elo the kosav psuke psuke. What he's doing is first he's writing the pasuk, and then the karile, and then he's reading it from the pasuk that he just wrote. Frag the Gemara, even though he's reading it inside, but he doesn't yet have a Megillah here. It doesn't work either. Or mi yatsa, is he going to be yaitze? Va'am, Rab Chel by Am, Rab Chama Bagurya Amarav. So he says as follows. Halachic kedivrei ha'omer kula. So number one, we paskin like the opinion that says that you have to read all of the Megillah. We're going to see in the next Amud that there's a machlokes, on the next daf, when you get to reading the Megillah, there's an opinion that says you don't have to read the entire Megillah. You can only read a part of it. You start from Ish Yehudi or whatever, from wherever you start. But we paskin like the opinion that says that you have to read the entire Megillah. And not only that, he said, Ish Yehudi, even the opinion that says that you only read the Megillah from Ish Yehudi, but tzricha shetehei ksuva kula. You have to have the whole Megillah written in front of you. Or at least the majority of the Megillah we had before, even if you have some words erased or some psukim not written, you have to have the majority of the Megillah written in front of you. So over here, this person is writing one pasuk. He only has one pasuk of the Megillah in front of him written. And he's reading that one pasuk. How can he be yaitze? He doesn't have the Megillah written yet. Answers the Gemara, so the pshat of the Mishnah is different. Ella, rather, the case is the manche Megillah kamei. He does have a full Megillah that's in front of him. Vikari la mina psuka psuka. And from that full Megillah that he has written, he reads from there the pasuk. And then the kasav law. And then he writes another Megillah. That's how the person is writing the Megillah. You have a full Megillah written, and then from there he's copying over to another Megillah. So he's actually reading it from a full Megillah. Says the Gemara, if that's the case in our Mishnah, if so, this would be a proof to what Rabbi Bar Bachana said. Because he said in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, anytime you're writing, let's say a Sefer Torah or a Megillah over here we're talking about, you can't write it from memory. You have to copy it over from something else that is already written, so you shouldn't come to make a mistake. So since that's the only way to learn Pshat in our Mishnah, that he does have a full Megillah written in front of him, so we see, like what he said, that you have to write it min aksav. And again, also lichtav eis achas shloim min aksav, yeah, so that's the raya from our Mishnah. So the Gemara says, no, it's not a raya from our Mishnah. It's not telling you the halacha that you must do this. Dilme des rami la yisramuye. In our Mishnah, that is just the way it occurred. It occurred that he had a full Megillah in front of him, and he's reading it from a full Megillah. Maybe he's doing it for convenience. It's easier for him. But it's not telling you that you must read it this way. So it's no raya. Well, now the Gemara will bring this halacha itself and examine this halacha. Gufe, Amar Rabba Bar Bachana, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, Asa lichta v'isachas shalom and aksav. You're not allowed to write one letter for the Megillah if you're not looking from a written Megillah. So the Gemara asks on this. Amar Rab Shimon ben Elazar. Rab Shimon ben Elazar said, "Ma'aseh b'Rab Meir." There was once a story with Rab Meir. Shaholach la'abra shana ba'asya. He went to the place Asya to be ma'abah the year. It was in Chodesh Adar, and the Bezdin there was going to decide to add another Adar. So Asya is actually not necessarily inside Eretz Yisrael, which is a chiddush that they were doing the Ibr Chaydish not even in Eretz Yisrael, which is an unusual thing. Usually it could only be done in Eretz Yisrael. But the point is, what happened? Megillah. So they didn't have a Megillah to read from and put him. What did Rab Meir do? V'kasva milibai. He wrote the entire Megillah from memory. And v'kara, and he read from this Megillah. So what do you see from here? You can write a Megillah from memory. How does Rabbi Yechanan say that you must copy it from a written Megillah? Rabbi Avos says, Shani Rab Meir is different. The Mikayim Bey, because by him it was fulfilled what it says in the Pasuk. Va'afa pecha, and your eyes, Yashiru negdecha. He looks straight ahead, and he has the Torah right ahead of him. He sees everything. Rami Bar Chama Rab Yirmiyah Medifti. So he said to him and he explained what's the drasha of this pasuk. Mai va'afapecha yeshiru negdecha. What is the meaning of this drasha? Amalai, he said to him, Elu divrei Torah. This refers to what his eyes see in Torah. Because regarding Torah it says, Hisif einecha boy ve'einenu. If you turn your eyes away, if you close your eyes from Torah, you forget the Torah. So we see that the eyes refers to what you see in Torah. So usually a normal person, you turn your eyes away from Torah, eventually you forget it. It's not etched into your memory. Whereas by Rab Meir, his eyes always, he saw straight the words of Torah. So therefore he's able to write it without copying it from another Megillah. So that's the chiddush over here. They're straight ahead in front of Rab Meir. So the Gemara says, Rav Chizde, Ashkechel Rav Chananel. Rav Chizde encountered Rav Chananel, the Avakas of Sfarim. He was writing the Sfarim, or a Sefer Torah, or whatever it was, Shaloi min Aksav, not from another Sefer that was already written. He wasn't copying it, he was doing it from memory. Amalei, he said to him, Ru'ya kol ha-Torah kula likasav al-picha. The entire Torah is fitting to be written through your mouth, through you, even by memory. But you shouldn't do this. Elakach amru chachamim. This is what chachamim said. Aser lichtov eis achas shaloi min aksav. You're not allowed to write even one letter without looking from another ksav, copying it. So what do you see from here? Medika Omar. From this, that Rav Chizda told him, that kol ha-Torah kula ru'ya shitkasav al-picha, that the whole Torah could be written through you because you have this memory. So miklaudim yisharanei netzloi. So we see that he had it all in his memory straight in front of him, just like Rab Meir. So if so, nevertheless, he's told him he's not allowed to write it this way. But Rab Meir did write it from memory. So how are we saying that if it's a person that knows is an exception and he could write it like Rab Meir? But we see that by Rav Chananel, Rav Chizda told him he should not do this. So the Gemara says another point here. Shasatchak shani. In a situation where you have no other choice, that's different. Rab Meir didn't have a Megillah. He wanted to do the mitzvah. So in that case, it's different. Let's finish off this Indian. The Gemara says, Abba Shara l'debei bar chovu. Abai, that is, allowed the Seifrim of Bei bar chovu to michtav to write Tefillin and Mezuzahs Shalom and Aksav. Tefillin and Mezuzahs, he said that they could write even not copying it from another Ksav, because that's something that people are more accustomed to, as the Gemara will say. Kaman, according to whose opinion does this go? Kehai Tana, like this Tana in the Bryce here. The Tanya Rab Yirmiyah Oimim Mishum Rabbeinu. Rab Yirmiyah said in the name of Rabbeinu, Tefillin and Mezuzahs Nechtavis Shalom and Aksav. They could be written even if you're not copying it from something else written. And also, ve'ein tzricha is sirtut. It doesn't need the markings on the paper when you write it, or on the klaf. V'hilchaseh, the halach is, tefillin, ein tzricha sirtut. Tefillin does not need sirtut, and the reason is because it's covered inside the tefillin, and so therefore it doesn't have to have that sirtut. But mezuzahs, tzricha sirtut. When you write the mezuzah, it does need those markings on the line for its beauty. Idividi, both of them, nichtava is shaloi min aksav. They could be written without copying it from something else that you wrote. My time, what's the reason? Migras krisim, because this is something that's very accustomed, that people know this by heart, so therefore it doesn't have to be written from something written.